All right, it is 2 o'clock, so I'm going to call the meeting of the Safe and Healthy Schools Commission, Monday, April 4th, 2022, to order. Can we start with the roll call, America?
Yes. Darren Balaam.
Present.
Ivy is not going to be here. She gets to be on spring break. Scott Benton.
Present.
Lorraine Benuta. Charlene Bybee.
Here.
Scott Caldwell.
I'm here.
Liz Flores.
Present.
Jessica Gogachia.
Present.
Amber Joyner. Rhonda Lawrence.
Present.
Leanne McCauley Larson. Oh, it looks like Amber. Okay. And it looks like Amber just joined.
I am here, thank you.
Okay. Peg Samples.
Here.
Natalie Sanchez.
Here.
And Misty Von Allen.
Here.
Roll call has been taken.
Thank you, America. We're going to move into item 2. These items are for presentation, discussion, and information and/or action items. Public comment on these items will be taken if they are action items. A public comment card should be submitted to the recording secretary before speaking during the public comment section. And we're going to move to item 2.01, which is the approval of our March 7th, 2022 meeting of the Safe and Healthy Schools Commission. Commissioner Bybee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I, Charlene Bybee, move to approve the minutes of the March 7th, 2022 Safe and Healthy Schools Commission meeting as approved, or as presented. We haven't approved yet.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I, Darren Balaam, second the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Balaam. With that, we do need to take public comment if there is any, America.
There is no public comment.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. I'm going to ask Dr. Lamarca to come up for item 2.02, which is the introduction of our new members of the Safe and Healthy Schools Commission, Lieutenant Colonel Scott Caldwell.
Thank you, Chairman Benton. So, ladies and gentlemen, introducing Lieutenant Colonel Scott Codwell. Scott is a Washoe County School District employee, heads up our junior ROTC efforts. For full disclosure, he works within our office, but I consulted with General Legal Counsel, and they were comfortable with his willingness to volunteer for the committee. So if you guys are willing, I'd like Scott to introduce himself, maybe say just a couple words.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to serve the district in another way. I've been here finishing up my 4th year as the director for JROTC, and really interested in this committee. Before I was here, I was at a really impoverished district in South Florida, and I would say most of my students were in transition compared to the normal student population, and we didn't have a commission like this. We didn't have a lot of support, so we did a lot of things ourselves with that. So I was always very interested in that, and no, I'm just very happy to be here and try to get into some of the work, and hopefully I can contribute some way. Thanks.
Thank you, and I thank you for your service and your dedication to the school district. And we're going to move into item 2.03, which is the discussion of programming and supports and resources in place for Washoe County School District students living in transition and Washoe County School District students being supported through the foster care program. And this is for information and discussion only, and it is going to be presented by Rochelle Morello, Intervention Department Director.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here, Rochelle Murillo, for the record. I am the director of the intervention department in the school district, but I'm going to talk to you just specifically today about our program, Children in Transition, if you wouldn't mind going Thank you. Just to give you an idea of what my department does, there's several sub-departments within my department, but we all work collectively together as a team so that we can support our families in need. So Children in Transition, I'll give you some more information about today. I've been in front of this commission to talk to you a little bit about family resource centers. Happy to answer questions about that. I did give you flyers. If you want more information, I'm happy to give you more information about this as well. I also oversee any interventions around chronic absenteeism and truancy intervention. Re-engagement is our programming that serves students that have left our district, and we are trying to invite them back into our school district and re-enroll again. And then anything attendance related in terms of attendance codes, attendance, record keeping, those kinds of things, practices, what that looks like at as teachers take attendance, those kinds of things. So that's my department. Our mission statement is ensuring student success by removing barriers and building resiliency with families and children. So we do that through an approach where we provide support and services, collaborating together with schools, parents, and guardians, and other folks, including the students, to provide them supports that they need. These are some of the services that we provide, including home visits. So during the closure of our schools in 2020, we all together collectively did about 2,500 home visits, delivering academic packets, food boxes, laptops, whatever families needed at that time. And then we provide mentoring. We support school staff through collaboration and meetings. We do mentoring and support of our students as well, help them with re-enrolling. It depends on what they need. And then we do a lot of work around food, clothing, and access to basic needs. Okay, so let's talk about Children in Transition. This is our program that serves our students that are homeless in our district. Our numbers have been interesting this year, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our numbers and what that's looked like. Children in Transition is a federal mandate for all school districts. It's been around since 1987, so Reagan was in office when this law was put into effect. And it defines homelessness for students, school-age students, as children who lack a fixed, regular, adequate nighttime residence. So the definition of McKinney-Vento is a little bit different than HUD. And as you go forward, I'll tell you a little bit more about what that looks like. So our main goal and what McKinney-Vento asks us to do is to identify barriers for students who are attending or enrolled in school or not enrolled in school and are homeless, and address those barriers and reduce those barriers so students have full access. They have the same opportunities and access to any other academic extracurricular activities as any other student in our school district. Thank you. I did want to give you an idea of what it looks like right now in terms of our numbers. So Children in Transition, we used to collectively identify foster and homeless together. In 2016, Every Student Succeeds Act asked us to separate those two numbers, and so we identify foster separately from homeless. So those top numbers, we currently have 1,609 students that are homeless in our district. This is significantly lower than in typical years. Not because we have less students that are homeless, but we are having a harder time finding our students and identifying our students because they are sometimes not in school or they've moved schools. We have ranged anywhere from over 3,000 to down to 1,609. So we currently have a goal of trying to increase our outreach to weekly motels and shelters so that we can make sure that families are aware of our services. We also have right now 1,037 students in foster care, which is significantly higher than we have seen in the past. Our numbers that we have served have been between 800 and 900. So we're seeing quite a bit of an increase in students in foster care this year, but I can tell you that about 136 of them have been reunified this year, so that's always good news. I also wanted to share with you some of this information. Below that diagram there is our chronic absenteeism rates based on special populations. In particular, I wanted to point out to you the CIT column, which is the highest column. Those are students that are homeless. They have the highest rates of of chronic absenteeism in our school district. And you could probably guess why, because they don't have stable housing. And they also have our highest severely chronically absent rates in our school district. Severely chronically absent students, well, let me define what chronically absent is. It's missing 10% or more of the days that you're enrolled in school. But to be severely chronically absent, you have to miss 20% or more of the days enrolled in school. So they have the highest severely chronically absent rates in our school district. So that's something that we are really working on, is identifying our students, supporting them, providing them mentoring, and identifying the barriers so that we can address and they have access to school. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we talked about the definition. McKinney-Vento requires that we provide educational access to students, that we're supporting their attendance, and there are no barriers. That includes documentation. They don't have to have birth certificates when they enroll. They don't have to have shot records. That doesn't mean we don't have to provide that eventually, but to get enrolled, they are allowed to enroll immediately without documentation, and then our office works on getting that documentation for schools to have on record. These are some of the living situations that would fall under the definition. So we have students that are doubled up and living in homes because of financial hardships. So they might be sleeping on the couch because they are not able to afford. I looked today at Realtor.com to see what the average housing cost is in Washoe County, and it's fluctuated quite a bit, significantly, but it was $462,000 for an average cost of a house in Washoe County. So if you look at what kind of wage you need to make to be able to afford a home in Washoe County, it's pretty significant. Rent is also pretty significant too, and our weekly motels are pretty expensive as well if you're living in weekly motels. Weekly motels, hotels also qualify you as being in transition. Living in trailers, RVs, and campgrounds, so without skirting, living in sort of a temporary movable home. Any homeless shelter, if you're living in a car, living outside, living in an uninhabited building, anything that's qualified as inadequate or substandard living, unaccompanied youth. So if they're living without a legal guardian, those youth or on runaway status, those youth are identified as unaccompanied youth. And then migratory or refugee families that fit into any one of these living situations. So how we structure children in transition, we have about 8 liaisons in our district. We call them homeless liaisons, and we have a coordinator. And Colin is our brand new coordinator, Colin Usher. I thought he was going to come, but he wasn't able to make it. He got busy. We got him busy right away as soon as he started. And so they are all they're assigned to a school. So every school has a homeless liaison, and at each school we've asked them to identify a homeless advocate. It's typically a counselor. At middle and high school, it's a lead counselor. So they help us because they know their families the best to identify students that fit into those living situations. They let us know the needs. They let us know the living situation. We identify them, and then we make sure that the students have everything that they need to get enrolled, to have access to food, to participate in any activities that they might want to participate in. So I remember one year, a couple years ago, we had a little girl in elementary school come to school with no shoes. So by 10 o'clock, we had shoes for her. So that's what my staff do. Okay, so these are some of the other things that we provide. When students are identified, they automatically get free breakfast and lunch. We provide clothing and hygiene packets. We provide uniforms. Transportation, students who are identified as homeless and in foster care have school of origin rights. And so let's say they live in the Reno High School zone, and then they were displaced, and now they move in the McQueen zone. They have a right to go back to Reno High, so they can choose either their school of origin, which would be Reno High School in this case, or McQueen, their zone school. If they choose their school of origin, then we support that and we request transportation to get them back to their school even when they live out of zone. That's really important because we want that consistency. Sometimes school, those relationships, their peers, their teachers are the only consistent, significant relationships that they have in their lives, particularly our unaccompanied youth. So we want to keep kids in a location where they're familiar with the staff, they have that connection, and they can continue on to be successful. We use our grant funds to support things like sports fees. If kids want to play in soccer, if they want to play football, we pay for those. We help facilitate access to birth certificates. When you're displaced, a lot of times you lose your documentation, so we help pay for those things. We help order those things for them, shot records, those kinds of things. We have a warehouse full of school supplies for our kids, field trip costs, caps and gowns, anything like that. We do that. Sometimes we do prom tickets. Sometimes we do tuxes or prom dresses. It just depends on what our students need. And that is Children in Transition. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Jessica Gogachia. I was just wondering how your transportation has been working with the recent cuts and how that's affected, if at all, the children who qualify in your services.
Yeah, our transportation department, I have to say, is pretty phenomenal. That's one area that they have worked really hard in trying to keep those routes in place for our children in transition and our students in foster care. So very few of them have been impacted. On those blackout weeks when we don't have transportation, we have vans available to us that we have been able to purchase through grant funds. And so staff have taken those vans out and picked up kids during that week also. Those vans are also used for temporary transportation. So if a student moves, we can't get a route right away. That takes some time. So they'll use those vans to get them to their school while we're waiting for a route to be set up. I know it's been a real challenge for transportation, but for the vast majority of our students, they have not been impacted by the routes yet. Yeah.
I have a question. Hi, Peg Samples for the record. Thank you for the presentation. It's really informative. I'm wondering how outside agencies outside the school district can refer children to your services.
Yeah, we have information on our intervention department website. We do social media too, just to get information out. We have some really strong relationships because we collaborate, and it's part of our department family resource centers too. So we have formalized partnerships with Human Services Agency, Washoe County Juvenile Services. So they do refer to us directly now. And then we do try to get out there for like Reno Area Alliance for Homeless. We try to get out and are participating in some of those outside community committees as well, so that we form those relationships. But we do have several formalized partnerships with outside agencies.
Okay, so outside of those formalized, like if I wanted to refer a child that I know through my work, what would be the best way?
Well, so I gave you guys this brochure. There's contact information on here. You can email me directly, or you can make phone calls as well. My contact information is on that PowerPoint. So you can email me. I'll direct you to the right liaison, and we can get families set up with any kind of resources that they might need.
Commissioner Bybee, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Charlene Bybee for the record. Great presentation. A question I have is on the supplies for the kids, from clothing, school supplies, uniforms. Do you purchase or acquire those through the grant money that you have? Is it school district money, or do you look for outside partnerships and donations from the community?
All except school district money. So everything that we told you about is grant funded. So Children in Transition is completely grant funded. So we get grant funds through McKinney-Vento, which is a competitive grant. We're actually in the process of writing up that application as we speak. We get some set aside funds through Title I as well. And then we have some partnerships. Alliance League, Reno Rotary provides us some foundation grants as well. So that helps us to purchase some of those school supplies, hygiene packets, those kinds of things. So it's a combination between community agencies and grants, but we do not take any money from the general fund.
Thank you for clarifying that. Do you take community donations? If someone wanted to contribute clothing or funds for that, do you take private donations from private individuals or private companies?
We do. Yep, we do all the time. And then we also have the Big Reno Coat Drive that partners with us, and they collect coats during the winter for us as well. So yeah, we do private as well.
Any other questions or comments from the commission?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle. I appreciate you. All right, that takes us to item 2.04, which is the discussion of Nevada Revised Statute 392.466 and 392.472, Assembly Bill 67, Assembly Bill 194, and Senate Bill 354 passed during the 2021 Nevada legislative session, all of which relate to discipline, suspension, and expulsion of students in the Washoe County School District's Behavior Manual and Restorative Practices Plan. This is for information and discussion. I'm going to toss it over to Dr. Lamarca to introduce the panel.
Thank you, Chairman Benton. For the record, Paul Lamarca, Chief Strategies Officer, and you have in front of you again Rochelle Murillo, the Director of the Intervention Department, Trish Schaefer, the Director of the MTSS Department, and Tristan McElhenney, who's the Director of Behavior. And I'm not going to try to steal their thunder at all. We know that there have been a lot of perceptions in the community regarding safety in schools. I believe Tristan has presented to the commission previously around behavior, student behavior, and our behavior manual. Every 2 years when the legislature meets, discipline is a hot topic. And unfortunately, I believe for good intentions, in recent years, legislation has created sort of this false dichotomy that has contributed to this sense of a lack of safety, and they're going to get into that a bit. I just want to state very clearly that restorative practices is not the opposite of things like suspension, but unfortunately the legislation has sort of pinned restorative practices and restorative justice against what most of us sort of remember as traditional disciplinary practices. Those things can go together. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to the team and they'll talk to you about some of the legislation, some of the issues we're working with.
Thank you for having us, Trish Schaefer, for the record. You have in front of you some of our revised statute. And what we were really hoping to do today, because we have been in front of you before, is just talk through some of the pieces of legislation and then some of the legislation that has been converted into statute and how it's impacting our work. Paul did briefly mention the misconceptions around restorative practices and suspensions are sort of mutually exclusive, and that is definitely not the case. We have in front of you a couple pieces of statute. First, I'll start with 392.472. Essentially, that is requiring us to have a plan in place as a district to help support our students before expelling them, and that requires a variety of different supports, including restorative practices. It also outlines that when our students are engaging in behaviors that could be perceived as harmful or dangerous, they do have a restorative plan. However, I want to be clear that it does not say that they need a plan and they cannot be suspended. They can go hand in hand. Looking down at NRS 3924644, Tristan and I call that our anchor piece, because the very first thing, the first bullet, holding a pupil accountable for his or her behavior. So these are things that are done hand in hand, where we work with our students and our staff to figure out the root cause of the problems and how can we help them correct their behavior right any wrongs, help the victim, which is something that's new. Traditional disciplinary practices, we don't typically address the victim, where in this we do. But it allows us to work with them so that our students don't feel voted off the island, so to speak. Traditional discipline practices at times did sort of exclude our students from the school community, and we know having strong relationships and strong connections in our building is what helps them stay in school and be successful in school. So if you think of it almost as a familial approach, right? When someone in your family causes harm, you don't kick them out of the house immediately. You try to get down to, what do you need? This is what happened, and what do we need to do to make things right? And then for NRS 392.466, this was an important piece for us too. And this one is really contributing, I think, I want to jump in, to the perception of lack of safety in our buildings. Importantly, this one, for our students under age 11, we don't typically now suspend or remove them from a building, where in years past we were able to. With great exception, we can move them to a different elementary school, but unless there's extenuating circumstances, we are not able to place them into what we would call an interim alternative educational setting. Also, for our students who may engage in battery or distribution, we may suspend, but we typically go with a restorative plan first. And that's different because that used to lead to an interim alternative educational setting placement right away.
And then, so, sorry, rather than going straight to a behavior hearing for an IAES or an interim setting, the first step is a restorative approach to try to get the student back and engaged in their school community with a second offense for either battery or distribution, then coming to me for a behavior hearing to look at whether or not the student needs to be placed in an IAES or an interim setting.
Yeah, and the only exception to that is a weapon, a dangerous weapon, when that comes, and they do go directly to an interim alternative educational setting. There's been several pieces of legislation. We listed a handful of them. There's actually been 7 since 2019 that have come about. And I think with any piece of legislation, the intent is there, and when we begin implementing, we find some unintended consequences, which is what we're working through now. Later this afternoon, we're presenting some of this information to the superintendent's behavioral task force, which will help inform our work locally and in the state of Nevada, and potentially in our next legislative session where we might be able to address some of these things. I think we were hoping for some discussion.
So I'll fire one off. So
Yeah.
for example, for parents that are watching, hopefully they're
Yeah.
paying attention to this, what would be an example of a restorative plan? So if you put the student on a restorative plan, what would that be if they got in trouble, so parents kind of have an idea of what that may entail?
Generally, the restorative plan would be making sure that the student is finding a way to be get productively back into their school community and repairing harm that they may have caused. I know that there are some specific plans on Trish's office.
Yeah, so we often try to get down to the root cause too. We view behavior as communication. So when a student is engaging in some type of behavior, we typically look at that as they are telling us they need something different than what they're receiving. At times that can be a skill set. At times they may feel threatened themselves, so then you see them act out. So we try to get down to what skills, resources, or access do they need to not engage in the behavior again. As Tristan referenced, we also do, if the student admits and everyone agrees, we do often work with the victim and the offender to see if we can't repair the harm that was caused. That is not always the case. A very easy example for all of you would be bullying. We're very careful with that to not re-victimize a child. But the plan, importantly, too, is done in collaboration with the family and the student and the school. And then we would also set dates to mark revisit of the plan. How is this working for you? What else do you need? How can we work with you to let you know that this is not acceptable, but you are still welcome and a part of our community?
Natalie Sanchez for the record. Hi, thanks guys.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. I'm curious, what feedback have you heard from teachers? Do they feel like this is a good supportive plan and it kind of makes sense to them, or what have you heard from that end?
I know that the traditional piece where battery or distribution was went directly to a behavior hearing. The restorative plan taking the spot of the first incident has led to some people feeling unsafe because the plan it's not a quick thing to do to get that plan in place and follow it, but that's in some instances I think led some teachers to feel like there's a safety issue.
Right. So if we have a student who causes significant bodily harm and then they show up a few days later, then there is a perception, particularly if we have folks who are not fully informed, that nothing was done. And so we are working to help provide information to our staff as well as to engage in listening sessions with them to make sure that we're really hearing the concerns, which is also part of our work at the superintendent's behavioral task force this afternoon.
Thank you.
Yes, Commissioner Bybee.
Charlene Bybee for the record. Question on the relief for any victim. What would that entail? And I do like your anchor piece on that statute, the NRS, on those step-by-step. But that's a tough situation, for if I was a parent of a child who was the victim, and I guess if I was a parent of the child who was a perpetrator also, and different ages, elementary is different than middle and high school, but that perception not only of the kids involved, their families, but other students too. We have to make kids feel like they're safe. And we have to obviously, decide what the needs are of the perpetrators. But what would specifically, I'm curious on what relief for any victim and what you've done so far, kind of what your restorative practices are, although you said you didn't do the victims before, you just worked with the perpetrators. So how is that new and what are you doing?
Right, so more traditional type disciplinary practices did not outline, particularly in statute, relief for the victim, and that's a very good question. It's obviously individualized, but one of the questions that we ask through the restorative process is we ask the offender and the victim, what do you think needs to be done to make things right? And that question opens the door up. For some of our students, I'll be really honest, depending on the occurrence and how severe, it also includes a safety plan for the victim and the offender where we ensure that they are not crossing paths in the school, but we do work with them to, kids are pretty resilient, amazing human beings, and they most of the time can tell you when there's conflict, what needs to be done to make things right. But safety plans are a part of that where we do keep the students separated. We have eye-line supervision that is occurring in our building, and our team works to help our schools create that. I don't know if you want to add.
Just basically to say that through my process with the behavior hearings, one of the things that I'm working into those meetings right now is asking those questions. So I'm asking the questions of the offender. What do you think should be done? So yes, their placement in an IES is dictated by state law most of the time, but I'm trying to introduce that into the thinking process of when you go to an IES, you're still going to be end up going back to your zone school or back to the school environment. So it gives them purpose or a reason to think about what to do next and to come up with their own plan about how they're going to address it when they come back to their community.
Mm-hmm. And sorry, I also think I would be remiss if I didn't mention that we do also offer counseling and mental health supports for some of our students, depending on the severity for our victims as well as our offenders.
Well, and I guess I was going there next with the mental health.
Yes.
And especially given our increased rates of suicide
Yes.
and youth suicide and several in my city within this last year, the mental health side of it.
Yes.
Whether it's bigger than just, I mean, it's, you all know, I mean, it's not silver bullet for anything, but really the whole mental health issue, suicide, bullying, aggressive behavior and how kids are dealing with that with each other and where that takes some of our kids and even kids you don't even realize until you find a suicide and you don't even think, it's maybe not even the kids that are coming to you and part of these hearings, but the atmosphere of what's allowed in the school, what's okay, what the culture is, I think is really, peer support for each other, teaching our kids, I guess, with your social emotional, all of that to try to support each other. Is critically important if we're really looking at the mental health and teen suicide that we're facing right now. We can't do enough.
I agree.
We really can't do enough right now.
Wholeheartedly. And our two colleagues, Catherine Loudon, which I think you all know, and then the Director of Psychological Services, Brandy Olson, are our other two folks who are up here, and we work in conjunction to make sure that we are addressing the whole child and the mental health needs and ways to help support and identify our students who may not be as vocal about some of the concerns. It's easier for us to identify kids who are sharing or who may be acting out in other ways, but you're right, some of our students we don't know.
And also part of that effort is ensuring that through restorative practices, we're actually working on helping schools build community so they know how to access somebody if they're noticing a friend is having issues with mental health, and basically making sure that the school as a community has a way to talk about mental health amongst other things to further themselves, I guess is the best way to put it.
Any other questions or comments from the commission?
This is Liz Flores. I have a comment.
Yes, Liz, go for it.
Thank you. So I appreciate this presentation, especially how all of the recent legislative changes have impacted the policies of the school district in order to have a comprehensive response to all of these new regulations. From a juvenile justice perspective, this is very similar to the holistic approach that we attempt to provide as well, because we have to balance not only what's appropriate for the community, but also for the offenders who come through the system as well as the victims. Victim restoration is a critical piece to the work that we do, so I'm very thankful to hear that this is that the school district has been very mindful of that as well and is providing resources and services there. I share with the school district the challenge associated with really having a balanced approach, because it's not easy. And somebody previously, I apologize, I didn't catch the name, is that perception is really critical as well, because the perception is that oftentimes in both of our businesses is that the only solution to ensure safety is complete removal. And in my world, that means arrest and detention, where we hopefully are sophisticated enough to recognize that there are perhaps other options, providing we're meeting the needs of both the victims as well as the offenders and actually the community at large. Children who maybe are not directly involved in these incidents are watching these things and observing these things, and it's impacting them as well. So my comment is merely just in show of support for the school district and their efforts to embrace these regulations that have been placed upon them and move forward in a way that's hopefully positive for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Flores. And I think you really took the words right out of my mouth. Meeting the kids where they are at. There's no one plan that fits for everybody, right? So this helps me understand that you guys are going to restore the child back to the situation if it's safe. Mm-hmm. But the situation itself is looked at individually, that you're meeting the child's needs, both the victim and the perpetrator. So I appreciate hearing that. And I think it's consistent in the message out of your office that you're meeting the individual needs. It's not a one size fits all for everybody. So I encourage that work to continue to happen, and I appreciate the work that's happening.
Thank you, Chair Benton.
Is there any other comments?
I'll throw one out there. Darren Balen, for record, apologize, I didn't do that the first time. Real quick question, because since we're the Safe and Healthy School Commission, how can we help you? I think it was you that gave the recent interview of the Vaughn, but how can we have our annual safety forum coming. Is there a way this commission can help either spread the word or be a mouthpiece for you in the community? So I throw that out to you of how we can help.
The big piece is going back to our cornerstone, the 4 bullet points in NRS 392.4644, holding the student accountable, providing restoration remedies really for the victim, and then changing the behavior of the pupil. Making sure that message is loud and clear in the community so that they don't look at restorative practices as something in lieu of traditional discipline. It's part of it. That's an important piece. Other than the other piece that I think is huge is building community in schools and in general, so that students have a way to interact in their school, feel safe, and have a voice in trying to figure out who they need to talk to and what they need to do to make their community better, as well as feel safer.
I think the more you can help us with our anchor, those 4 points, that they're not mutually exclusive, it's not in lieu of, will help us tremendously. And it is about building community. And thank you for offering to help us. We are very grateful. Absolutely. Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions, comments for the commission? Well, I invite you guys to stay for the next part, which is our Safe and Healthy Schools Safety Forum that we are going to talk about. Maybe you have some contributions or some asks that we can ask of you for that. So if you guys are able to, I will try to get it done before 3:15. I know we're time sensitive. I will put that out there so that everybody knows they have asked to leave before 3:15. So.
And thank you for the invitation. Yes, happily.
Thank you. So with that, we'll move right into item 2.05, which is the discussion and possible action to determine content, logistics, and marketing for the 2022 Annual Safety Forum. This is for possible action. I'm going to invite Megan up. In preparation for this meeting, Megan and I met to discuss the logistics and some of those tasks that we were assigned from last meeting, also with the Vice Chair, Ms. Stevon Allen. Had some great conversation, and I wanted to bring back to the commission our topics. As we heard in item 2.04, there might be something missing from our safety forum. And what that safety forum topics that we have, I'm going to turn over to Megan so that she can go over those. But me as a single person on this commission, I think we're missing the school climate piece that we all know is happening in schools. And I think Tristan and Trish and those people have some contributing factors to help minimize misunderstanding in the community. And I think when I talked to Megan and Misty, that was my drive, is I don't want to be bombarded or overwhelmed at the safety forum by questions that we don't have answers to or we don't have the right people there for. So I'm going to turn it over to Megan so that we can recap on the topics, and then we can discuss on maybe are the topics still what we want, because we have all of the month of April to plan our marketing. We want to have this out towards the end of April. April 15th to the end of April was our goal.
Great.
Megan, it's all yours.
Thank you. Megan Downs, Communications Manager, for the record. Thanks for having me here. So from my records, and America, please correct me if any of this is wrong, what I have were the 4 breakout sessions that we had agreed upon. The first was sort of a mental health literacy / 988 education, and we can nail down exactly what we want that to look like if we want it to be a little more broad in scope. The second being the gun safety / driver safety piece, and we had talked about a lot of issues in both of those buckets, if you will. The third, suicide prevention, we had called it earlier being connected to prevention of suicide. And the fourth being substance abuse or use, misuse, weaving in those topics of fentanyl use, the connection to mental health, also Narcom use as well. So that's what I have. If we can get a little more finalization, that way we can sort of market these in a pretty bow, if you will.
So I think the challenge that I'm going to task all of us with today is, one, giving Megan some ideas of session topics so that she has those, and then also helping me identify some subject matter experts in the community that we can approach and ask to be a part of our panel discussion. And if these 4 topics are still what we want to move forward with, or if there is an opportunity that you guys feel we need to combine and add more, or whatever the pleasure of the commission is. I know we had some great discussion the last 2 meetings on this, and I think these topics alone they stand great on their own. I'm just afraid that we're missing the school climate issue that Trish and Tristan talked about previously today. And I would like to include that in the safety forum if you guys are open to that. Commissioner Bybee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can you repeat again, Megan, with the very first one, mental health /
There was some discussion of that with / the 988 education, which I believe is a bit of the suicide prevention as well. So some of those might be repetitive. Correct me if I'm wrong, Scott.
Well, we can toss it over to Sheriff Balaam. That was his idea to bring that out because they're getting ready to roll out the 988 messaging.
That probably you could probably roll that into the suicide prevention just as another outreach. Because that's rolling out of, there's another avenue for kids besides the app and everything else they have where they can call out to 988 or call for somebody else instead of 911 for somebody in crisis, so that we have a response team that goes and intercepts them. So
Mr. Chair, going on to, and I would agree, I think that 988 fits perfectly with suicide prevention and an awareness for everybody, for parents and for kids, what the 988 is and why they have to dial their area code now when you're making a phone call. Try to explain that to a 92-year-old. As a side note. So when on school climate, Chair Benton, what exactly what are your thoughts on what school climate would include?
I think it would include everything that we heard under item 2.04 on the discipline, the suspension, and the ways that they handle the restorative plans. And then also, Misty, jump in and help me if you can. Some of the things that I saw was out there in the community, we know that there's issues going on within the school. We can bring in some principals that have already combated these issues, and how are they combating it? What resources are available at the school? At what point does it get elevated outside of the school to an area superintendent, or what does that look like? I think there's some misconception in the community that it's allowed to happen and they don't do anything about it. But that's further from the truth after I heard some of these things. So I would like parents to know how to report it and what the proper channels are. If it's happening on the bus, does it go through transportation and school police? Does it go through the school administrator? Do they investigate? I think being transparent to the community and allowing them to understand the process might educate them a little bit more rather than casting stones and that the school district's not doing anything.
So under school climate, and I agree with you on what we just heard in the last presentation being critically important. I also think, and they kind of touched on it, when you talked about building a community, and I think I've been on this commission since it started, and I think in the very beginning we were looking at how do you form a community of kids being mentors to kids, feeling they're part of the community like a family, and everyone being part of that family to support each other, which is obviously has all kinds of benefits beyond that. So the NRS, the restorative plans, all of that, discipline, bullying, and the community kind of, to me, I think I agree, falls under school climate. It encompasses a lot, and I know in the short time we have on these, how you hit on or provide resources for those other things and maybe not spend a lot of time, but acknowledge it. But I think the school climate piece, and could the substance abuse, would that fall under mental health? Because, do we want it as a completely separate topic, or do we want to incorporate it into mental health because it can be a component? And all of you who are the experts in mental health, it's not me, is substance abuse hand in hand with mental health, or it can be and can't be, but do those fit together, or do we, because that would give us 5 instead of 4. Yeah. So just my thoughts.
Thank you. Go for it, Misty. Vice Chair Allen.
Thank you, Scott. So before this meeting, I had reached out about the 988 presentation, and we do have Kelly Marshall from Social Entrepreneurs who's working closely with the state on that. So we could either have that separate, but now I'm hearing we might need to consolidate. So it would absolutely fit well with suicide prevention, and I can work with Kelly on that if we want to consolidate that topic. We could consolidate suicide prevention, mental health literacy, and 988 probably all in one.
And I would be remiss if I didn't ask Commissioner Sanchez and Commissioner Benuto for your opinion, since mental health literacy was kind of your guys' topic that you had thrown out. I know it's a heavy topic and it very well could take 2 hours to discuss mental health literacy, and I think it was more around resources for those that are in crisis, what do we do right now, and ongoing resources and supports for those that are in mental health crisis, and understanding what the community has to offer. So I don't want to discount your guys' feedback that you provided over the meetings, but do you feel that it's something that we can combine and still have that robust conversation that you guys were looking for?
Yeah, I think so. Commissioner Sanchez, for the record, I think that it seems as though as if we, because it's such a big topic and it could be an entire week-long extravaganza of mental health. But if you were able to do something like, here are the numbers you call, and then, tailor that with Misty's presentation, I think that would hit it. And just some basic signs, not only of suicide, but depression, anxiety, some of the things that ultimately can lead to suicide.
Yeah, Commissioner Benito, for the record, I agree with Commissioner Sanchez's points. I think they can be categorized in that way, and that would make a nice framework.
I think we have, being that our forum's going to be virtual again, I think we have some advantages to that. For the last year, our forum was posted on the Safe and Healthy Schools Commission's website through the school district, so they are tools that can be referred to frequently through the community. The unfortunate part is we don't know who's accessing them after the forum, so we don't know the numbers of who we're really touching, but I want to make sure that if that is the desire of the commission, that we know that it's out there, that we can always refer back to. An hour and 15 minutes isn't a lot of time. And if you can't catch all 3 sessions, you might miss something that you really wanted to, but they can go back and watch it again after the forum is over. Commissioner Gogochia, I've been practicing.
Can I just clarify? So it was initially discussed just a second ago, linking mental health literacy and substance use, and now it sounds like we'll do mental health literacy along with suicide prevention in 988 and keep substance use and probably like fentanyl, Narcan, naloxone, all of those pieces as a separate.
It's totally up to the commission, whoever makes the motion, and if it's supported and voted on, that's how it will fall.
Okay.
I think we were just throwing out ideas of where we might think they fit.
So the goal is going to be for us just to have these 4 breakout sessions. So we're trying to combine to have a separate breakout session for school climate, sort of to address all these other pieces.
Correct.
I just would like to put this out for consideration. The substance use misuse, fentanyl, and understanding like where that is and how that's impacting our students and parents and our community. While I think mental health literacy also, definitely could utilize that hour and, that whole hour. I think that we kind of have that topic going pretty consistently, whereas this substance use, especially around fentanyl, might be kind of a newer topic to spend the whole time on. I think, bringing in experts and bringing in statistics and even death statistics is going to probably be pretty heavy for people to be able to sit and ask questions. So I would just, for consideration, ask that we try to keep that one separate for this year's commission meeting.
Awesome. And I would be remiss if we don't discuss the outline. So each session, there's going to be 2 sessions that are 25 minutes, and then they'll be able to pop into another session, and they can pick between 2 other sessions. So they're going to be parallel in sense. So we may offer prevention of suicide along with gun safety, driver safety at the same time, and then 25 minutes after that, they'll get to go into another session, and they're going to be the substance abuse, misuse, and whatever the topics are. There's 2, and then they get to go back to 2 separate ones 25 minutes later. So the way the forum will start is that we will open it up with some opening remarks from myself, the superintendent, and a representative of the Board of Trustees. And then at the end, we all come back together for some question and answers. And they also have the ability in the breakout session to ask questions. And that's where I will rely on all of us to be there as moderators to help field the questions if you're not serving as a subject matter expert, because I have your names that I'm going to ask later to serve.
Sure, Ben.
Can I turn it over to Dr. Lamarca really quick, and then back to you, Commissioner Bybee?
Thank you, and sorry to interrupt. So this may sound strange coming from me, because I would love for us to be able to spend full day talking about conditions of learning, school climate. But if you kind of recall the things that we've brought to you family school partnerships work, we've brought to you counseling, SEL, MTSS, certainly the focus today around intervention CIT. We've done FRCs in the past, the talk on behavior. That's all part of school climate. And quite frankly, each of the topics that you're already discussing is sort of school climate. So if we were to add something, we would need real focus on what you want. And I wonder if maybe in your opening comments, we could help with some ways of framing it around conditions of learning, because school climate is like, cover your ears, Debbie, it's everything. I mean, it's almost like instruction. Like if you were to add 20 minutes on instruction, it'd be almost impossible to do. I think you're going to run into the same problem with school climate, unless you're just going to do a very small sliver that somehow helps connect these things, which we'll take your direction, but I'd be a little worried about that.
Thank you for that input. Commissioner Bybee.
I like that perspective because I would agree with you also. And all the other things we're looking at does affect school climate. So maybe incorporating in the beginning kind of where we're going, what we're looking for, because all of these things are integral to what our school climate is for our kids and for our families. So I'm really confused now on which things we're lumping together and which we're not. You should see all my notes over here, everything's crossed out. And so really on the, because mental health literacy, are we looking at mental health literacy on its own or with substance abuse? And are we looking at suicide prevention and 988? Absolutely. I think those two together. Are we going to keep mental health separate and substance abuse separate, and then our gun safety, driver safety? But what are we, I know we need to make a motion to decide what we're lumping together, but what direction are we going in? I think mental health literacy is huge. You know, like Natalie said, you could go weeks talking about mental health. You could, because you're an expert. I mean, and I would listen for weeks. But, you know, I really think that the suicide prevention 988 can be lumped together pretty easily. I think my commissioner here talking about the substance abuse and information I probably don't have is very valuable information. And in those short sessions, again, 25 minutes is not much. And we found that every year we do these topics and you're tip of the iceberg and hopefully a lot of resources to get people help to move beyond that. But we can't, you know, solve the issue in 25 minutes. It's just providing the information that we can. So I would say mental health should be alone. Gun safety, driver safety, suicide prevention with 988, and substance abuse are kind of where I am. I don't know where everybody else is, but just for the record.
And I'm right there with you, Commissioner Bybee. Those were the 4 original topics that we talked about. And I'm okay not bringing school climate into the safety forum. I'm okay with the 4 topics that I made the motion on the last meeting for. So we don't have to add anything. We can keep it the way it is, and we can break it out the way you suggested. Commissioner Sanchez.
I was just wondering if, in order to get in a little bit of that piece of school climate, and then with the specificity, is if we could do maybe mental health literacy and then tie in Family Resource Center and some of the programming that's available through that as a way of like, here's another opportunity and here's how your school district supports you and here's what's available to you.
And hearing you say that, I think that goes back to your original comments that you wanted the community involved. And I think hearing Tristan in his previous presentation, I wrote down school communities, building communities in school, who to talk to. I think those two would go hand in hand. So we don't have to do an elaborate discussion, just making it a positive reinforcement that the schools have a community within the schools to go to. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay. So I'm going to open it up to the commission to make motions. We can make the motion to include those 4 topics, but we should also include in our motions, or have some discussion around the topics, how we're going to promote them and market them, what topics. I don't like the idea of substance abuse and misuse. I took away the abuse part, and I think we were just doing substance misuse. so that we're trying to attract people to a positive conversation, not there's a lot of abuse in the community, and how to negate that. We want them to understand that there is misuse and what signs and what things to look for. So I just want to open it back up to you guys for some ideas on marketing and ways to help Megan.
Question real quick. Charlene Bybee for the record. On the substance issue, could it be substance education? Would it be substance misuse? Help me out, somebody, you guys who are working in this. How do you frame it professionally when you're looking at substance abuse issues? How do you frame it if you don't want it to be negative, but you want to draw people into a session that would give them the information that they need?
Commissioner Goguchia, for the record, I think it can be framed how we want to frame it, right? So, of course, I agree, substance abuse is not really used anymore. That's not a term that people tend to say. And so I guess it depends what the discussion is on the very specific goals. Just saying substance education, I think, also isn't wonderful. We're not educating on substances in the bigger picture. So how to implement it into the wording for this particular goal, I think may take a minute. On the best way to describe what we're doing, what the topic is, and what the goal is, all together. So I don't have a wonderful answer right this second, but let me think. By the end of this, I'll have something great.
What about something to the effect of substance misuse, like a educating families on, and then maybe listing out whatever the specifics of the topic might be?
I think educating family on risks might be great, because that's the goal, right? Is the risks, especially when we're talking about, if we're talking, well, for 25 minutes, we need to kind of pinpoint. So I think, we can do basic stuff that kind of the schools are doing, on alcohol use and those sorts of things. But if we want to target sort of this it's not new anymore, but, this upcoming thing that's killing our kids of fentanyl use and I think bringing in even just purchasing, people are purchasing these things off of the internet. They're thinking they're buying a Xanax or a whatever, and they're dying from that. Those kinds of things, parents in our community and even our kids, they just don't know it. And so I think, I really like that.
PEG samples for the record. Could we call it something like what parents need to know about fentanyl and emerging drugs or something like that? So anything you say with fentanyl, parents are going to want to go to.
I love that. I think you should make a motion on that.
Will you repeat it so I can write it down?
Sure. What parents need to know about fentanyl. Or I don't know if you want to include the other drugs in the title or just say similar drugs or something like that.
Sheriff Balaam.
And I think to stay on the track for 25 minutes, I say we just talk about fentanyl. Because back to what Jessica was saying, for those parents I think out there, that there's a misconception that, oh, my child just smokes marijuana, it's legal, yada, yada. But if they're not, they can't legally buy it. But if somehow they're acquiring it from a legal dispensary, it's okay. But if they're acquiring it on the street, there is a 90% chance that it will have fentanyl in it. So I think if we stick to fentanyl and the dangers, and unfortunately we educate them, and we can bring some, or Dr. Woodard from the state can bring some and educate them on the Narcan. I mean, those are discussions these parents need to have and have it available if they suspect their kids are using. And that's very specific, and we should fit in 25 minutes.
Yeah. I think Sheriff Balaam and the commission, I think we probably would, with 25 minutes, it'll probably be kind of statistical, understanding where fentanyl's coming from, which is everywhere other than your doctor's office and a legal dispensary. and then giving the resources for where to find Narcan, where to get trained on it, because that Narcan training is so important, but that takes way longer than the 25 minutes. So by the time we describe what this is and how it works and how people die, we can then say, and it's reversible if you go here, and here's how you find that out, and here's how you carry that, and everybody should have it. So.
Megan's feverishly typing away. It's a good sign. So I think I have a good understanding of the substance misuse. I've written down what Commissioner Samples has said and what the commission has said about some ideas, because we do have to write some informative piece on what each topic is. So this is a great conversation.
And just a question for the committee, are we determining the experts in each room at this point, or will that be done offline with the chair and co-chair?
I think that was a task that I took on, that we would identify today. At our last meeting, I took that on, Misty and I, so that we can identify what the topics are, and then we would reach out to the experts in the community or in the school district or off of the commission. Any ideas on the prevention of suicide in 988, or the mental health literacy, or the gun safety and driver safety?
This is Misty Allen. I think we have the suicide prevention 988 experts covered.
Okay.
So it will be probably from OSP plus the 988 expert, or just OSP, one of my staff.
Okay. I'm going to come back to you, Misty, for a title, but I'm going to toss it back over to Commissioner Samples for a motion on the topic around substance misuse.
Thank you. I make a motion to title that particular topic, What Parents Need to Know About Fentanyl.
There is a motion. Is there a second?
Jessica Goguchia to second that motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Goguchia. I'm looking for public comment before we take action on this.
There is no public comment.
Thank you. With that, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So we have one topic out of the way. I will go back to Vice Chair Allen for a title on suicide prevention, or prevention of suicide, and 988 messaging.
Hi, Misty Allen. I did not get that far because I thought we were using connecting on suicide prevention. So let me sit with that as you move on to the other topics and see what I can put together.
Perfect. I'm looking at Commissioner Sanchez. She knows I'm looking at her. And honestly, I'm ready to make a motion on just mental health literacy and letting that be its own topic, but I would like to get some bullet points to Megan so that we can have an idea of how to entice parents and community members to come to this.
I would say general mental health awareness. When to seek out outside support, resources within the district, resources within the larger community. What other things I'm looking at Lorraine and Jessica. Mm-hmm.
Things to look for in your student, or some kind of parental awareness of student need, student concern.
Maybe like signs that, maybe tying both those together, so signs that you may need to seek out outside resources for your student. Something like identifying mental health.
And maybe also how to communicate that with your teacher. So, part of that is also if there's a recent death or a divorce or something like that, those are all really helpful things for teachers to know.
Okay, so I will make the motion that we have one of our 4 sessions, mental health literacy, contained with all those great descriptions that we just had.
Lorraine Benuto for the record, I second that motion.
Thank you. We're going to send it over to America for any public comment.
There is no public comment.
Thank you.
And just to clarify, your motion is on the subparts, or those the subtopics?
Correct.
And those would be everything that Commissioner Sanchez and the other two commissioners talked about?
Yes, those were the descriptions so that Megan can write a description of what that is offering under mental health
I want to
literacy.
make sure our recording secretary has
If we can
those.
just review it, so I make sure I have
Perfect.
it
Do you want to
correct.
read out what you have?
Can I help you?
Well, so, if you want to go ahead, I have general mental health awareness, when to seek outside help, resources within the district and outside of the district, parental awareness, signs to look for to reach the outside resources.
And then I also have how to communicate that with your teacher or educators. Yeah, no worries.
Perfect. Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So we have two out of the way. Great job. We're moving through it. The other one that is on here is gun safety and driver safety. And how we landed these two together is fun, and I think it was Commissioner Flores that I should toss it over to. These were some of her ideas. I had to look around the room to see whose idea was this.
Commissioner Flores, for the record, I don't recall exactly how we got those on this together, except I remember conversation about sort of around mortality, and that both of these issues are ones that have very significant consequences if we take it to the worst case scenario. I remember talking about the driving safety. One thing that we're seeing, a recent legislative change is that it is now a misdemeanor for parents to allow unlicensed drivers to drive. And unfortunately, that's a thing that we see in our agency, in our juvenile traffic court. And the rate of incidence of accidents has risen exponentially in the last couple of years during COVID, and continues, unfortunately. That's the trajectory we're seeing with youthful drivers. We do have a connection in our agency with the Nevada State Police now. It's no longer Highway Patrol. And they actually have a young drivers task force who do a lot of work in this area. And if the commission were so inclined, I'd be happy to reach out to that group or to see if we can use them as a resource from an educational standpoint for families.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Flores. I too don't know how we landed on gun safety and driving safety. They're two very different topics, but that's why we're here today. If we want to change the idea and only go with driving safety, we can. If we want to keep them together, we can. Today, I think, is the day to finalize some of this stuff.
I mean, they both broadly fall under keeping your kids safe. So if you had something like keeping your kids safe, recommendations for, I don't know, guns and driving.
Commissioner Flores, for the record, it's just another point of information. What we do, unfortunately, because we do see a significant amount of weapons offenses, particularly firearm, is we do have protocols that we educate our parents on about how to properly store guns within a home, how to do safety planning, things of that nature. We even provide, gun lockers, gun safes for families in certain circumstances. So there is information out there as well that can be provided to families that also falls under that general safety umbrella.
Okay.
Hey,
Yes,
Scott
Commissioner
Caldwell for the
Caldwell.
record. Yeah, I would offer up as well, so you know that in the junior ROTC programs in the district, we have a pretty healthy air rifle program. It's the NCAA Olympic 10-meter air rifle competition, but we partner with the civilian marksmanship program. We actually have curriculum that we teach, which is firearm safety. Obviously, it's specific to handling air rifles, but the basic principles are the same. And so both our curriculum and the civilian marksmanship, they have lots of different levels of safety courses that are free, something that we could push out as well as a resource. So,
Perfect, thank you. I'm going to toss it back to Commissioner Flores for a title.
Oh.
Or I could even toss it over to Dr. Benito. She came up with something great.
I mean, you're welcome to chime in. I don't want to rain on your parade, but just keeping our children safe. Recommendations for safe driving and, I don't know, firearm.
And gun safety,
Yeah.
firearm safety.
Yeah.
Not raining on my parade, this is Commissioner Flores.
Prior to making a motion, I'm wondering if we could use youth or something other than children, just so that we can attract like teen parents as well. I don't know if youth is the right word either, but just be in our, keeping our.
Does anyone know the statistics on, it seems to me like guns and cars are the two biggest things that endanger our students. So if that's true, could we kind of call it something like that? Like keeping your kids safe from the two biggest threats or something to that effect? Just to kind of catch parents' attention a little more.
This is Commissioner Flores. I'm happy to research that. I don't know the statistics offhand, but I agree that they're both. I don't know if they're the top two, but they're up there, and I'd be happy to research that.
Hey, this is Misty Allen. They're considered the leading causes of death. I don't know if that's too heavy of a topic title, but it is absolutely accidental injuries, suicide by firearm, car crashes. The suicide passes car crashes.
So PEG samples for the record, something like guns and cars, how to protect your children from the two biggest fatalities or something to that effect.
I like that. Do you want to make that in a form of a motion?
If everyone thinks that wording is appropriate, I would make a motion to entitle that particular section of the safety forum, whatever I just said. I can't remember it now.
Guns and cars, how to protect your kids from
The two biggest causes of fatalities, something like that.
Did we decide on the word kids or youth?
I feel like youth was the one that everyone liked the most.
Okay. Once you have the motion written down, America, will you repeat it so we can make sure we understand it before we vote on it?
Okay,
And
but
how
I think
about leading
Yes.
causes of death instead of two biggest, because that could be, depending on age groups, could be fluctuating.
Yeah, that sounds great.
okay.
And Chair,
so-
if we're looking, I'm sorry, Charlene Bybee, if we were looking for a word instead of children or kids, should we do students? Because we're talking about, isn't this directed to our students in the district and their families?
That would have to go back to the motioner, and she would have to be okay with that.
Just throwing it out.
Sure, whatever the commission feels is appropriate.
Perfect.
Okay.
So, Commissioner Samples, I'm going to ask you to retract your motion and then restate how you desire the motion to state.
I
And
would
the commission will
retract-
vote on that.
I would retract my motion, and I would resubmit the motion with the language.
Guns and cars, how to protect your
Students.
from the two leading causes of death.
Okay. Do I have to repeat that?
Okay. That's my motion.
All right, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Commissioner Benuto here, I second the motion.
Thank you. And America, can I interrupt your writing to see if we have public comment?
There is no public comment.
Thank you so much. With that, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We have 3 out of 4. Vice Chair Allen, you're in the hot seat again.
I think I'm ready, but I would welcome other commissioners' input on this, especially as we prepare. How about how to talk to your child about suicide, since they all seem to be focused on the parents?
Perfect.
And then we can tailor some of that discussion around different ages and different culture.
I think you should make that motion.
I was going to say that landed like a ton of bricks.
I will accept that in a form of a motion when you're ready.
I move to title the suicide prevention session as How to Talk to Your Child About Suicide.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Lorraine Benuto, for the record, I second the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Benuto.
Discussion.
Yes,
Please.
ma'am.
Quick question. Since we're going back to our terminology, do you want child or student or youth? We keep throwing around how to talk to your child. Should be encompass all ages. So are we good with child because your child could be high school senior or it could be a kindergartner? So we're good with child in this case? I'm just checking with all the experts here.
That was my intention.
Okay.
Commissioner.
Okay. No, I'm good. I'm good with the motion. Thank you.
America, do we have any public comment?
There is no public comment.
Okay. So with that, we have a motion by Vice Chair Allen, second by Commissioner Benuto. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you all for that hard work. I'm going to send it over to Megan to make sure she is clear in what she needs from us.
I have everything I need from you. I'll be communicating with you just for additional timeline information and just to finalize some of our marketing materials. But other than that, we should be great.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you.
And before you escape the hot seat, will you remind us of the day and the times just so everybody, and these are all things that we have voted on, so it's just a reminder.
Correct. And I'm pulling up my calendar so I don't misspeak. All right. We are holding this forum on May 4th. There are 3 different offerings. The first being at 7 a.m. to 8:15. The second at noon to 1:15. And the third at 5 to 6:15. All will be virtual. There will be some discussion on determining moderators. I don't know if that's happening today, but we're going to do that as we get closer.
I think now that we have our topics solidified, I think it would be fair to, in the public forum, ask for your guys' contribution to that day on May 4th in whatever capacity it is. In the past, the commission has served as moderators for different topics. So if you are available, Megan, do you want them to best communicate with you so that you can assign them, or how do you want that to work? How did it work last year? Was it Misty?
It's been I think it might have been Misty. I don't mind doing it, just letting me know your preference, unless Misty would like to, but otherwise that's fine. You can just email me your preference of time and subject.
And if I can enlist you in that, just so that we don't violate any open meeting laws
Sure.
with all of us communicating, it goes right to you.
It will go right to me. It will not be shared with any other members of the commission. Yep. And my email address is M, as in Megan, Downs, DOWNS, at washoeschools.net.
And Megan, we do not meet again before the safety forum, or do we meet right before?
This might be the...
It's right after.
right after.
Okay. The forum is right after our next meeting.
Our next meeting is May 2nd.
And then we have the forum on May 4th. So ideally, we want to get some of these things worked out so that we can reach out to people that, and really the job as the moderators, which most of us have served in the past, is really watching the chat, introducing our speakers, really just playing an integral role if you're not serving as a subject matter expert on any of those 4. I will also toss out to you guys, if there is something that you are passionate about and you feel that you can speak on for 25 minutes on any given of those times, certainly reach out to Megan and we can communicate that way. I have some ideas of who I might target to ask to serve on different topics based on what you guys bring to the table. And if not, I think there's some great resources within the school district, MJ Cloud being one of them. I think pairing her up with Commissioner Flores might be a good option. So just throwing some ideas out there if you guys want to. I don't want to ask you guys to participate if you're like, May 4th, I'm in Mexico and I can't do it. So if there's anything that you guys want to participate, I want it to be at your level of comfortability. Okay. Do we have any other needs that we need for communications?
I think that's it. Thank you very much for your time.
Awesome. Thank you for your hard work. I appreciate you. From the commission, do we have any other discussions or action items that we need to solidify for our 2022 annual safety forum? I'm looking at Vice Chair Allen. Is there anything that you can think of that we're missing?
Forgive me, yes. The one thing we keep talking about, Chair Benton, Ms. Downe, for the record, an evaluation of this process. Any feedback or ideas for a brief evaluation we can send out to the participants. We did not get information last year on what they thought.
Yes, and I think this is important for the commission as a whole moving forward, what topics work, what times work, what didn't work. And Misty has been very passionate about reminding me that these evaluations are important. So I am going to advocate for these evaluations. I think what we can do is it could be a short, brief survey monkey type survey. Sorry, I'm looking at Megan. And we can email it out based on when they sign up for the safety form, do they provide an email address to access that?
We can require that if the commission desires. Another suggestion I was going to bring up is just doing a poll within the webinar, so to speak, so they give more real-time feedback and you don't have to worry about them filling it out after they've left the discussion, if that makes sense.
Yes. Misty, does that suffice what you were looking for?
Absolutely. I think that's a really great way to keep them engaged as well.
Perfect. As far as the survey goes, what kind of questions would we be looking for? And I'm opening this up to the commission so that sorry, I'm going to allow Megan to get her computer. She thought she was off the hook. But what kind of questions are we looking for as far as the survey goes?
Lorraine Benuccio here. I would recommend keeping it very brief. Maybe coming up with like 2 questions that are, maybe scaled, and that's it. Are we like considering topics like how helpful?
Yeah, I think we just want to understand where the safety forum lands in the community. Is it something that is beneficial? I preach about how last year when it was virtual, we had more visitors than we've ever had in person. So I think asking a question, is virtual platform better than in person, would be helpful just so that we know moving forward as a commission. And then also you can ask how it was helpful or what was helpful, that sort of thing, so that we have some open-ended questions to get some answers. Maybe they didn't like hearing statistics. Maybe they're not a statistic person and that's just not what they want to hear. So it gives them that opportunity to say, I want the meat and potatoes, but I don't want to hear that 90% of people that are struggling from whatever is happening with this. Or vice versa. Maybe they might say, I really appreciate the statistics. I've been looking for this and I can't ever seem to find it. Thank you for bringing this to light. Giving them both options, I think.
Sure.
Commissioner Biden?
I think we need to, I agree, it needs to be brief for sure. And maybe 1 or 2 questions with a scale 1 to 10 on, was it valuable? Did it provide you additional resources? I don't know if those are, for sure, did you find that, that it to be a valuable resource that you would use? Or, and when you do a scale thing, people can do it really fast. If you leave a blank that they've got to type something in, they might not think about it. They don't take the time. But if it's yes, no, or if it's a scale, the scale would kind of, instead of yes or no, did you find it valuable? Yes or no. A scale kind of gives you strength of, yeah, it was really great, or it was okay, or it wasn't good at all. So I think a couple questions on a scale would be helpful, and I don't know that I can, other than was it valuable, maybe what those questions would look like.
And I think hearing what Vice Chair Allen has said, that this survey is important, I think we should vote on yes or no having the survey, and then we should task it with Deputy Superintendent Beiersdorf brought up a very good point, accountability. So saying, yes, this is what we want, bringing some ideas to them, having them meet with Megan and together on May 2nd. I don't think we need to solidify the questions today. We can solidify them on May 2nd. Just knowing that the survey is going to be out May 2nd, we solidify the questions to how in-depth they're going to be and that sort of thing. But just moving forward, that we are going to ask staff to compile some questions for us under some guidance that we are talking about today, if that sounds fair.
And that will give us, I was just going to mention, it will give us some time to determine our capabilities within the webinar site so that we're asking the questions that we can technologically support.
Perfect. So I'm going to make a motion, if we can get a second or not, and then we'll have some discussion or should we have the discussion now about the questions?
This is Misty Allen. I would like to make a motion that we do have a brief survey for the participants, and I would like to also know future topics. I think that would be helpful.
Thank you, Vice Chair Allen. We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second the motion. Charlene Bybee.
Thank you, Commissioner Bybee. We have a motion and a second. Do we have any public comment, America?
There is no public comment.
Thank you. I will open it for discussion. If there is discussion, I appreciate the motion being direct and concise. With that, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. So the last and final topic that we'll need a motion on is asking staff to communicate with communications and the Chief Accountability Office, or the Accountability Office, to compile a survey and bring it back to us on the May 2nd meeting of the Safe and Healthy Schools Commission. So I will make that in the form of a motion. Did you get that?
Second?
My motion.
Asking staff to work with accountability for questions for the survey.
Correct. Thank you. Any discussion? Any public comment?
There is no public comment.
Thank you. A second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. Do I dare say it again? You're off the hook again. Any other conversation that we need to have around our safety forum? No? Okay, with that, we will move on to our closing items. Item 3.01 is public comment. I will look at our recording secretary to see if there's any public comment.
There was one public comment that was in your meeting packet from Mr. Joe Morabito.
Thank you. Item 3.02 is our next meeting announcement. Our next meeting is May 2nd, 2022, here in the boardroom at 425 East 9th Street. With that, it is 3:32, and we will adjourn our meeting.